So, right hand. We have not talked a lot about right hand yet because we've been focusing on building our left hand. But this week we are going to start doing some exercises so that we can get a little more comfortable with the bow hold and kind of what we're going to need to do in order to find success once we start incorporating it. So, your handy dandy pencil or writing utensil, which I literally just dropped. Oh man, the struggle is real. So, with your right hand, make sure you're using your right hand. Notice your thumb. The way that I like to build my bow hand is I am placing my thumb on the bottom and I'm using my left hand to hold it so I don't have to worry about it. Then I always joke that it's kind of like a bunny. So you make bunny ears. And then your bunny is kind of sad. So your bunny ears are floppy and down. Now something that's super important is notice how right now my thumb is straight. You actually want to have a slight bend in your thumb, so from here to here, and that will slightly rotate the pencil in or the bow in, which eventually you'll want to like practice with the bow. But you want that thumb bent because if you don't, you are going to create a lot of unnecessary tension and it will create a lot of pain potentially going from here all the way into your wrist, which we don't want. Now, another thing, notice my pointer finger. I always like to say that the power kind of comes from that pointer finger. Everything else is pretty relaxed. Like I should be able to tap my pinky because my pinky does not want to be locked anyway because once again, that creates tension here. So the way to combat that is remember how we talked about the fatty first joint in the other finger when we were talking about, or in this hand when we were talking about pizzicato. My brain forgot what hand we used for pizzicato for a second. That first joint is kind of where you're going to have your pointer finger be resting. Because when I bow, the majority of my weight and pressure and speed is coming from that first joint. It's not coming from my pinky. So for violin and viola, this is kind of what you're looking for. So remember, we're using our thumb, making sure he kind of has a bit of a chin. Then we're putting our fingers on top. And then we should have our droopy sad bunny ears. So our first joint is where the pointer finger is resting, and then our bow hand, in our bow hand, our pinky should be able to tap and be kind of comfortable. Now, I'm going to show you what that looks like with a bow so that you can get kind of an idea. So this is actually a cello bow, so I'm going to show you violin hold first, and then I'm going to show you cello bass. So violin, this little like curved area here, that's where my thumb is resting, and that's where my thumb is resting with that slight bend. Now with violin, there's usually typically like an eye or a circle right here, and you're not going to want to cover that eye, you're going to just want to be slightly above it, but your ring finger should be slightly aligned with that eye or that circle. And then my pointer finger, that first joint is resting on this rubbery part. Yours might be silver. And then my pinky is just up top and resting. It shouldn't be hyperextended and it shouldn't be putting a bunch of weight on it. So that would be, let me show you again. This would be kind of what I would consider to be a good bow hold for my violin playing. If you are wanting to try this with your bow, I'm holding it with my left hand so that I don't have to create more pressure in trying to keep the bow up. So that's a way to do that. Now, if you're playing cello or bass, so it's a very similar setup. So we have the same thumb bend in the back, but instead of kind of resting more at the top, you're going to want to essentially move your middle finger and ring finger closer to the middle. Your ring finger almost wants to cover that eye if you have an eye. And then instead of resting on top, your pinky is actually kind of creating a neighbor next to your middle and ring finger. Because when you're bowing back and forth like this. Versus violin and viola need that different bow hold because theirs is not resisting the weight of gravity pulling it down, if that makes sense. So cello bass, same thing as what we set up for violin, except you're gonna let it edge down just a little bit. And you can do this with a bow, you can do this with your pencil. If you are using your bow, make sure at the very end you have your little nut, which is a screw. If the way I like to think about it is righty-tighty, so if I'm going clockwise, that's going to tighten the bow, and you'll see actually that more space will be created in between the hair and the stick. Then if I go left or lefty-loosey, it actually loosens the stick and the hair tension so that there's less space. You want to make sure that if you are ever with your bow, that you are not over tightening this hair, because it will stretch out and then it won't go back to normal. Hair isn't like, the horsehair is not like elastic in that it doesn't stretch. It stretches out, but it doesn't stretch back. So you want to be really careful with that. And then the other thing to note is you do not want to touch the hair with your hands, because your hands have oils even if you wash them, and that can corrode and make the horsehair not as good over time. So yeah, but beyond that, just being aware of how much tightening you have. Usually I like to say that I can usually fit my pinky in there for it to be tight enough without touching the hair as much. It looks like it's touching, but it's not. And then after you're done playing, you want to make sure that you loosen it back down so that the hair is not left in that tight format. So yeah, that's bow. You can practice that with your bow. If you don't have a bow, or you're like, I don't want to get my bow out of the case, then use a pencil. In fact, I'm going to have another video with bow builders in here, and we will be using a pencil for that. So let me know if you have questions. You can also probably YouTube this. YouTube like cello bow hold, or violin bow hold, or bass bow hold. There will be a lot of videos that come up, and if you want a better or different view, that would be a good way to figure that out too.